There you go.
Right. Good morning. I want to call this meeting of the Governance Committee to order. I'm first going to call roll. Councilor Lombardi,
Here.
Councilor Tabor,
Here.
and I should note Councilor Tabor is on Zoom today. And I'm Councilor Cook, and I am here. Did everyone have a chance to see the minutes from the July 17th, 2023 meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye. No,
Aye.
roll
Aye.
call. That's right.
Oh, sorry, we have to have a roll call vote. Councilor Lombardi,
Here, yes.
Councilor Tabor,
Yes.
and I'm Councilor Cook, and this is yes. So the minutes are approved. I am going to go ahead and go to old business. The first item on the agenda is the Sustainability Blue Ribbon Committee Conversion Ordinance Status Update. I can give that update. At the last meeting of governance, I said that we would bring this forward on August 7th, which is our next governance committee meeting. We are on schedule to do that. But I should note the Sustainability Committee is going to present us with two options for the ultimate language that they would like to go forward to the council. They would like us to look at both options and approve either or. Basically, they're just still trying to make a decision. So, but they will not meet again until towards end of August, and they want to make sure it gets to the council for the September 5th meeting. So they want us to kind of look at both sets of language and say, okay, will these both work? And so that then they can make that final decision and have it come forward to the city council. So I thought everyone here should be aware of that. That's at our next meeting that they'll be asking us to take a look at that.
What does that language that they're offering entail? What piece of the,
They're questioning how to structure terms. So it's more about their decision on how they want the terms to be structured. You know, do they want everyone reappointed for a 3-year term, and then after people fall off, people get reappointed for staggered terms to make sure that there's a consistent stagger? Or do they want to go ahead and just stagger the terms now on reappointment? And so that's really their question, is which way works better, and they're kind of mulling it over in the committee to make that decision. The challenge is they just don't know, how well that will be followed at the council. If you reappoint everyone immediately and then ask as people fall off, and they get down to a reasonable number. I think we've had this discussion before, because they're close to 18. When they get down to 9 and reappointments start, that means automatically some people will fall off. But if they go ahead and stagger the terms now, then they will have that rotation with the assumption that people will get reappointed. So it's kind of this, which way works best. And they're not really, they really haven't made that call yet. So they're mulling it over. So they want us to consider both options, consider if they're both reasonable, and if they both are, then they will make the final call at the end of August. So I will
I
bring.
thought that might be what the issue is.
Yes, I will bring forward the language from them at our next meeting. We had a pretty busy schedule today, so I decided that maybe we can wait on that for the next meeting, since they don't meet until end of August.
And they want to decrease the size as well.
Yes, over time, they want to
Yeah.
decrease the size, but they want to make sure that everyone who's currently sitting is reappointed and has the opportunity to start the implementation of the Climate Action Plan next year. So I think that that's the concern. It's that they all want to be there for the jump start on the Climate Action Plan, and they know the Blue Ribbon Committee would sunset at the end of December. So that's where we are. The next item on our agenda is election disclosures. And we had started this discussion at our last meeting. I will go ahead and bring up the language that we're looking at. It's 1902. So this is municipal disclosures, and here's election candidate disclosures. This is where we started. I think it's important to note the first thing on our agenda is the current election disclosure requirements and its status update. I spoke with the city manager on this issue. Apparently, the city clerk's office has already corrected the form for this upcoming election. So I think that that's important to note, and that form should reflect exactly the requirements within the current ordinance. That was updated before this council took office, but after the last election. So there wasn't, it hasn't been utilized yet.
Okay, so is that what is reflected here?
No, the form that is currently in the ordinance is the sample from the state. So this is the state's RSA 15A. Thank you for joining us. So this does not, this is kind of the basis for our form. The form will look substantially like the form did in the past. It will just require disclosure of not just donations, but also expenditures. So, so that's the change, and that reflects 1902. So we're in good stead there. The next thing, though, to discuss is any proposed changes to the ordinance for 2025. And since we have Director of Public Works Peter Rice here with us today, I would suggest that if I could get a motion to suspend the rules and pause discussion on this item to bring up the sidewalk policy instead under new business.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. We'll have a roll call vote. Councilor Tabor?
Yes.
Councilor Lombardi?
Yes.
And I'm Councilor Cook, and I'm yes on that. So let's go ahead and go to the sidewalks policy first, and we'll return then to election disclosures. That way, I don't want to take up too much of our Director of Public Works time today. This is the current sidewalks policy. And as a reminder to everyone watching at home, last year when the council was dealing with a neighborhood request for brick sidewalks where they are not authorized in the ordinance, the council decided to authorize that request on the part of residents, but then to also ask the governance committee to look at the sidewalks policy. And so that's why we have the sidewalks policy in front of us today. We need to start having this discussion. I know that this has come up recently with a few residents also with concerns in their neighborhood where we're redoing current sidewalks. You know, are we going to have concrete? Are we going to have brick? What are we going to have in this neighborhood? And so I invited our Public Works Director, Peter Rice, well, actually, our Deputy City Manager, invited our Public Works Director to come and tell us a little bit about ongoing work that's being done on sidewalks in, I think this is specifically in the neighborhood between Islington and Middle, that again, we have a sidewalk project because we have a greater public works project that we're addressing. And what that looks like from the Department of Public Works side of things, because residents often request to have sidewalks, brick sidewalks, but how does that ultimately impact us as a city? So.
Sure. Good morning. I apologize. I live and die by my phone, and for whatever reason, this meeting was not on my calendar. My name is Peter Rice. I'm the Director of Public Works. The policy was developed to, in an effort to create some level of consistency and predictability for the city. Historically, there was a hodgepodge of materials throughout the city, and there's still remnants of that, but to kind of rectify that situation, decisions were made 20 years ago, 15 years ago, I can't remember exactly how long ago, but The policy originally was they created a historic downtown district, which would have bricks, and that it extended to certain areas as well because of it extended up a section of Islington, a little bit of Middle Street, and everything else was going to be concrete. And we were going to phase out the use of asphalt for sidewalks. We still use, I'm sorry, that's the city manager texting me. We still use asphalt for multi-use paths because they're for more bicycles and pedestrians. So the wider paths are still asphalt, but sidewalks, which are typically 6 feet wide, are concrete. So from a maintenance standpoint, we find that concrete is an easier material to deal with. Bricks, we've evolved over time and have made a better brick design where we have asphalt on the base and then we use a grout sand mix with bricks on top. And that's the reason we have to do that is because we have heavy sidewalk tractors that really beat up unsupported sidewalks. The policy originally did not have waivers, variances from that. A number of years after getting lots of requests, the council decided that they should enable me to have all the power to have waiver decisions. And that lasted for a little while until they realized that people were still coming to them because they didn't like the decisions that I made relative to whether a waiver was granted or not. And so they were the folks of last resort and kept that final decision, which is appropriate. And that specifically comes down to the typically the cost associated with doing that. As it stands now, I have the ability to grant waivers if the benefiting party pays the delta, the difference between a concrete sidewalk that we would have put in and the brick. So the Union Street project, which you referred to, was to be concrete from roughly the corner of Union Street, which, depending upon how you view the corner, the brick can wrap around to the first driveway and then be concrete from there. Typically, that's, depending upon the situation, that's how we do it. The desire to have a consistent material block to block, it falls into a couple areas. One, it's maintenance, because if you have different materials, you often have different settling, and it makes it more challenging when your sidewalk tractor could be degrading a brick sidewalk, and we're not intending to go back there in the near term, but bricks tend to wear out faster, or they can with sidewalk tractors. It also did not fall into the area that was historic. Yes, there are historic houses there, but it did not fall into the definition of the downtown historic bricked area. So for those reasons, we denied the initial request, and it was just going to be concrete. The resident or the property owner persisted, appealed to the process, and I said, okay, well, if you're, the message to that person is that you will pay the delta, and we will allow bricks to be put in. So that's where we're at right now with this. From a operational standpoint, I'm not sure if the policy can be changed significantly to make it any different. Residents are very passionate oftentimes about what the look is, the aesthetic of their homes, and if they feel they have a certain look they want to have, that's, they don't care if it costs them money. So from that standpoint, I would not encourage the council to absorb the cost associated with deviations. I think it's, if a resident wants something different, that's fine. You got to pay for it. Because if we grant it for certain folks and we don't do it a block by block type situation and the council doesn't appropriate the money for that, it's taking away from other work that we could be doing. So.
Yes.
Couple questions. I could see that could create a patchwork sidewalk, and
right.
That's a little
It's counter to the policy.
Yeah.
The policy was intended to try to create a uniform look
Right, no, I
and
I
the
agree with
ability
that,
to maintain.
yeah. I remember that the issue came up on State Street, where there was traditionally brick, but then not in the historic district. And I know the people there wanted to continue with that because it was traditional. And what was your thought on that? I forget what happened with that.
The council made a decision to go ahead and install brick, so we installed brick.
Okay.
You know, if the desire is to adjust that map and say, okay, this area is now considered historic, so when we go to replace it at some point in the future, it would all be brick. That's council policy. We will implement that council policy. Currently, we run off the map that we've been given, and that's pretty much how we approach it.
Okay. And then the other question I have is about the extension of driveways to the street, across the sidewalk. And I'm wondering, and across the city property too, I mean, if there's a grass area too.
Yep.
I'm wondering of the permeable material that you've used in some places, the permeable material that you put around trees, you've used it in the burial ground, the African burial ground, and how durable is that to the tractors? How durable is that and how expensive is that? And could that be a material that is used instead of asphalt in those locations, the extension of the driveway to the street, across the sidewalk, things like that?
It's not an appropriate use of that material. Those materials are intended to be for protecting trees. There's porous pavement, which is asphalt-based, which has more porosity to it, so it's not as tight, versus the rubberized material that we use around trees, which is a more of a you see in playgrounds sometimes, but it's a material that allows water to get through, and it allows people to walk on it and not compact the root zones. So it's a very different product from an asphalt that you'd be driving on, you'd be running equipment on. Porous pavement does not hold up well. Asphalt porous pavement does not hold up well to plowing, and I mean it's additional maintenance associated with it. We do use it in areas that is sensitive. You know, the parking lots you can use it, and it's not an ideal material, and I would not recommend using it for driveways, because when you do that, you actually have to rebuild underneath it and create like a space for the water to go and then outlet. Because if you don't, if it just traps the water, you're going to create a freeze-thaw situation where you're just going to pop the pavement and you're going to cause differential heaving. So, you know, folks oftentimes want, well, I want the sidewalk to go through my driveway. It's like, well, then you have asphalt on one side, asphalt on the other side, and driveway, and then you get differential settling between all those things, and plows hit it, break it up. It becomes very challenging. So our policy is to not allow that unless the property owner signs off and says they're responsible for all maintenance, and if we have to, we will pull it out and charge them to do it, because it is an increased maintenance issue. Oftentimes they want to have cobbles at their, you know, if they have a cobble drive, they want to cobble all the way to the road. It's not a good recipe for maintenance, and you know, we understand that folks appreciate it aesthetically, and I'm sensitive to that, but I'm also responsible for 110 miles of roadway and 70 plus miles of sidewalk, and you all don't want to increase budgets necessarily to address those types of things. If a private property owner wants that, the private property owner should be responsible for it.
Mm-hmm. The other question I have is the city is looking at and concerned with the permeability of a lot of land, and looking at adjusting a tax, if you will, on non-permeable surfaces. And I think the permeability issue is a problem, especially in areas like Pease where they have these gigantic parking lots and things like that. What is a solution to that in terms of large paved areas?
So we're drifting off topic a little bit.
Okay.
Well, a lot. This is to do with the Stormwater Enterprise Fund, and it's
Yeah.
not a tax, although people will call
Yes,
it a rain
right,
tax.
I know.
It is a fee for service, and being a fee, you can charge the nonprofits and people who are typically tax exempt. So that is one of the reasons enterprise funds for stormwater are structured that way, so that the folks that are actually impacting the costs associated with the stormwater system, actually we capture some of those costs. There are many ways to address that. Porous pavement is one of them. Looking at buffer zones around paved areas to capture the water and infiltrate the water. But this is really not something that I would consider relevant to the sidewalk
Okay.
policy. And we are anticipating some point later in the fall, towards winter, to having some discussions relative to the stormwater program. So
Okay.
something
No,
we'll have
I just
opportunity to
think
talk
of this,
further on.
all of these surfaces
Yep.
are impermeable.
Sure, I
So,
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Madam Chairman,
Yes,
can I ask Peter a few questions, please?
please, go ahead.
Hi, Peter.
Hi, Counselor.
I've assisted a couple of residents who really wanted to keep their brick, and some who'd really invest a lot in their historic house. And it went quite smoothly, and I think in some cases it was a group of neighbors who really cared about the character of their neighborhood. How hard would it be if we just grandfathered existing brick? In other words, replace brick with brick. I think it's always hard when you take things away.
Well,
And I just don't know, aside from State Street and Union Street, which we've worked through, how much more there would be.
Obviously, if it's a council policy is made, a decision is made to do that, we will implement that. The current policy, it does not say that, and it allows me to waive that if they pay the fee to the difference in cost. I have made those decisions on a case-by-case basis. In part, it's dependent upon if it's logical, associated with the area, and it can tie in easily to other sections. I would not recommend just grandfathering it, because it opens a can of worms relative to everything. I would leave it the way it is relative to that. If the council decides to change it, then obviously we will grandfather it. But I would not like to see everybody and their brother, because so you do this now, and then there's going to be a number of people say, well, I had brick there before, and you deprived me of it. I want brick back. So we'll go out and we'll rip out brand new concrete sidewalks throughout the city to put back brick that was in front of, and I'm thinking of a number of houses, which I know they will do that. And because they weren't willing to pay for the additional, but they will come back and say, well, you deprived me of what I had, a brick sidewalk in front of my house, because I wasn't willing to pay the difference. And now you did this for other people, you need to make me whole and put it back. And so I would not recommend, for those reasons, I would not recommend grandfathering.
I understand your reservations, and I understand the sensibleness that's the word, of having the property owners pay. My question was, what's the scope if we grandfathered the existing remaining brick sidewalks?
I don't have that off the top of my head.
Yeah. Okay. And then in terms of cost, I know that we do every couple of years, we bond for $400,000 or so to do sidewalk repairs, and as part of the ongoing maintenance and the good capital planning we do. How much of a cost difference is there for brick? If you can give us an order of magnitude.
3 times as
In other
expensive.
words, 3 times?
Yep. And I don't have the exact numbers because the prices have gone up significantly. The last time I had it, was like $12 a yard, a square yard for concrete. But I know that number is probably 36 right now. So if you're looking, if you're looking 3 times that, you're probably looking at $90 a square yard for. But those are numbers. Counselor, don't go to bank with those numbers.
No, just order of magnitude is great. And have we still got the slipperiness issue with brick sidewalks, or as I recall, we've kind of.
We've changed the type of brick we use, and it does not have the same slick nature of the old water-struck brick.
Right. I think it'd be helpful to know what amount of remaining brick there is that would be converted to concrete by this policy as it stands now. That said, I think having been involved in some of these waivers, the waivers do work pretty well, and the cost is shared by the residents. But I think Councilor Lombardi's got a good point. You get a piebald effect of some concrete and some brick.
Yeah, I just point of reference, I paid for the brick in front of my house. So and that was the
It's
policy.
personal.
That was the policy we had before this policy, was that if you were going to have brick, the private property owner paid for it.
Right.
So I mean, it's evolved over time, but I would like that money back.
Right. Yeah, I hear your concern on that.
And
I think
my
the
point
only
is
way
that
we'd allow people to tear up sidewalk and replace it would be at their expense. We don't want to go backwards.
Yeah, my point is that we need to try to be as consistent as possible. We need to try to have a uniform material where appropriate, and the waiver program as it is now, I think, is acceptable. It's not my preference, but I understand that sometimes you have to give a little.
Yeah, and we used to have a historic zone B, which we did away with.
Yep.
But there was a way of giving a historic definition to areas of the city that have historic housing but aren't necessarily, the very dense Federalist period downtown. And we don't have that anymore, but there's a lot of houses that you would consider historic, and I think State Street's a great example. Lower State Street is quite a mix, but some of parts of it, have a lot of historic character. So I'm sensitive to both sides of it. Thanks.
Yep.
So I have a question about mixing materials. When we do sidewalks that are brick edged, how does that impact cost, time of labor, all of those issues?
I don't have the exact numbers relative to the cost. That was one of the details that we put together for Islington Street, because there was this push back and forth relative to whether we were going to have brick, whether we weren't. And the detail of having that brick edging was well received. I don't have the exact cost implication on that. I wouldn't use it everywhere. I think it's appropriate in certain areas of the city. It does cause a situation if people get up with a vehicle on the area, or if the sidewalk tractor gets over to that area. It's not supported the same way as a brick sidewalk is. It's not a concrete, not asphalt base. It's a different. You have a different material there.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily designed to handle the same loads.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask generally around plowing. What's the impact of it? You know, is it much more difficult to plow as well because you've got the mixed surfaces?
No, we typically have the sidewalk wide enough so that you're not getting into that area. So that was kind of the benefit, is that you had the concrete section that you would plow, and then the brick would stay on the edge.
Okay. And I know that we don't know exactly the number of streets that are left that were brick but are probably in the concrete zone now. But could we say the majority of those are between South Street and Islington in that center part of the city corridor, or do they expand as far as the West End?
There are bits and pieces, and the Christian Shore, the other side of the North Mill Pond.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably some mixed bag relative there. There's not a lot of brick left over. Everything from south to middle pretty much has been done.
Okay.
The stuff in between Middle and Islington, there's still work that has to be done in there. So there's asphalt and there's brick and there's odds and ends in there.
Okay.
But I would have to go out and get an inventory to see exactly. I would hazard to. I wouldn't, unless you change the map in total, I wouldn't start adding, automatically replacing brick, because a lot of times you're better off just being consistent.
How much additional time, if any, does it take Public Works to do brick over concrete?
Typically, we contract it,
Okay.
so it doesn't take our staff time. It's just additional cost and time for the contractor.
Okay. Is there additional maintenance time that you have to invest, or?
Brick, both materials have their issues. Concrete can heave and the whole panel can come up, and you can get trip type things, which requires some time. Brick, you get single cobbles or single bricks and things like that. So it's comparable. It's hard to say.
Okay. And I have an unusual question around trees in walkways, mostly because I grew up where there weren't a lot of trees, so we never cut them down. If they were, sidewalks went around them. Is there, I noticed on South Street, the Department of Public Works decided not to take down several trees along, well, we decided not to take
Between
down
Broad
several trees.
and
Yes.
Sagamore.
Yes, where there is a sidewalk on the other side of the street. Is that generally the way we're looking at things now in an effort to try to preserve canopy coverage, or is it just very unique to that spot?
No, we always try to protect trees when possible. Oftentimes, you'll see we bump around them. We heave over them sometimes. We sometimes put asphalt in that area instead of concrete, just because it's more flexible and it just can be moved over time. Whenever we take trees down, we go through the tree ingredient committee unless it's a failing tree and it's an emergency. So we do the best we can, and in this day and age with climate change, high temperatures, the tree canopy does more than just provide a nice aesthetic. It cools, it does air cleaning, it takes up storm water. I mean, it's the environmental benefits associated with the trees are well documented.
Do we need to add anything to the sidewalk policy around tree preservation, or
I don't think
our
so.
residents are familiar with that? Or
I don't think so. The Tree and Greenery Committee covers that area pretty clearly, and staff, we have a good arborist, we have a good crew. We work very closely with our sidewalk folks, so we're very cognizant of trying to protect the trees.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Are there any further questions for our Director of Public Works?
I apologize again.
No.
Suzanne, the deputy city manager, had mentioned this. It just never got onto my schedule.
It's fine. Thank you so much for coming today on short notice. We really appreciate it.
You had very helpful information for us.
Yes, thank you.
You bet. Have a good day.
Yes, you too. So this is the first in a series of discussions I think that we need to have around sidewalks and sidewalks policy. If it pleases the committee, I was going to invite a representative of the Historic District Commission to come to our next meeting to speak to the way the Historic District Commission would see sidewalks, if that is reasonable. Is that something that everyone here thinks is reasonable?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else that we want to invite in to hear from before we go into the policy in more detail?
Not so much another guest to give us information, but if we could get the amount of remaining brick sidewalk, I think that would help our deliberations, and I could put that into a motion.
Okay. I can put in that request so that we have that information for our next meeting, if that works for everyone.
Okay.
Okay? Okay. And so I'm going to, if it's okay with everyone here, I'm going to go back to the agenda and we'll go back to our prior discussion where we were standing before, unless there's anything else on sidewalk policy that anyone wants to talk about today.
No, I just want to see something.
Okay. All right. Then we will return to the election disclosure section of our agenda. This is Administrative Ordinance 1902. And I want to continue our discussion of any proposed changes to the ordinance for 2025. I'll bring the ordinance back up so that everyone has a chance to see it. Here's 1902. I thought maybe it would be helpful if we went through this ordinance kind of line by line and made sure, we were comfortable with every section, and where we're not comfortable, then we can make additions. And with that in mind, if you go to section A, this is the general language on every candidate shall report contributions and election-related expenditures. So then there's also a definition of a political action committee. Any person or group of people raising and spending money to elect or defeat candidates for city council, school board, police, and fire commissions, or pass or defeat charter amendments, ballot questions, or referenda, which seems very broad to me and reasonable. Are there any questions or concerns around this definition, or things that we need to make sure we are including here that are maybe not here?
The enforcement would be the same as down in the last paragraph of this section. It would be the same for PACs.
It is for now, yes. So that's something that we probably need to address when we get to enforcement.
I think that's, it should capture anything that's a PAC, I would think.
Mm-hmm. I feel like this is pretty well written. If there are no further questions around A, section 1, we'll go to B. This is what is required to be reported. The cumulative total, not an itemized list, only if the candidates or political action committee's expenditures since the last municipal election equal or exceed a cumulative total of $100.
What expenditures?
Does anyone have questions on that one?
I think that's good.
Okay.
Wait, I need to read this again.
Okay, we'll pause for a second. This is section B of 1902. I think it's important to note that it's not from the filing period on, it's, so that's fine. It's from the last election on,
Okay.
so. That way you capture all expenditures in case somebody is planning early or,
Okay.
okay.
Mhm.
Section C, the report of monetary contributions to the candidate or political action committee shall identify each contributor of $100 or more since the last municipal election by name, address, amount, and date of contribution. And I think that we had a discussion at the last meeting around that total number, and I don't think that there was consensus to change that number. You guys can correct
Yeah, we
me.
had a,
Yeah, I think that's
I
right.
thought that was a good discussion last time, and I know my reflection on it is, I think this has worked pretty well. I think the threshold of $100, is pretty effective in revealing who your donors are. Yes, it's possible to bundle under $100, but I think that's a lot. That's a lot of work. I think this has worked pretty well for us, but that's one person's opinion.
Well, I agree with that. So it's two people's.
It's good. Okay, so then we will leave that figure where it is. I have a question here around in-kind contributions of $100 or more, and whether or not the committee wants to reflect those as well. Please note that this also wouldn't go into effect until the 2025 election. It's not for 2023.
You could make it a dollar amount or a value
Okay.
of a contribution.
So something like identify each contributor of $100 or items valued at that
Yes.
or more.
Or if someone says, I'll make a bunch of signs for you, and you'd want to know, because that's clearly over $100, and
Right, right. If you have somebody printing out something like that's not captured, it's not a PAC, so it's not captured in their disclosure. It would be like a friend
Yeah.
who decided to print signs for you or door hangers or something, and you were aware of it.
yeah.
I think that you'd have to make sure you put a clause in that you were aware of that contribution too. We'll ask our legal counsel, is that something possible?
It's possible to write it. I think enforcement might be a bit of an issue, but it could certainly be written the way you suggested.
I know that we rely on people when they register to sign kind of a code of conduct in the election, and
Sure.
we could rely on them, to be honest.
There's a bit of an honor system involved in all of this, and of course, if a council candidate or an election candidate did not comply with the ordinance, did not act honorably, that itself would actually become an election issue, I would think.
Right,
And that becomes the enforcement mechanism.
okay. Okay. Should we ask the legal counsel to go ahead and get us some draft language on adding a reference to or donations of items
Yeah.
of $100 in value, or?
But I just say this, as I read it, there's probably maybe 3 different places where you'd want to make small additions. If you wanted to account for in-kind contributions as well as money. And if you just instruct that that be done, we'll write them everywhere they need to be written.
Okay. How does everyone feel about doing that? At least
Yeah, so
looking
let's
at the language.
take a pass at that and see what the language looks like.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think we need to see the language and make sure
Yeah.
that it's something we're comfortable with, but I think it's worth looking at.
Yeah, and I think you have to be aware of it. I agree with that.
Right. That is the important qualifier. So it's something that you have to be aware of. And we need to make sure that there's language that says, and it's not disclosed elsewhere.
Yeah.
Because you could have a political action committee supporting you, but they're required to disclose it. So,
I mean, if someone kind of anonymously dropped off door hangers to me, saying, here's a
Right.
gift,
Right.
I wouldn't know.
Which I am told happens.
right. And if it does happen, then you'd have to be able to disclose it as unknown.
Yeah, an unknown contribution,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay,
Okay. The next section, Section D, the reports must be filed or updated as appropriate with the Office of the City Clerk 7 days prior to any election at which the candidate, slate of candidates, or charter amendment, ballot question, or referendum appears. Is everyone comfortable with that 7-day disclosure requirement?
Yes.
Okay. Any contribution received within the 7 days prior to the election must be submitted in a final report to the Office of the City Clerk no later than 2 weeks following the election. Is everyone also comfortable with that?
there is a final report anyway, right?
Yes, this is your final report.
Yeah, so, I mean, it seems like this, I guess if there's no change in the last 7 days, you don't, I mean, that is your final report, but it seems to me, this doesn't say that you have to put in a final report, even if you've reported changes 7 days before. It seems like, I mean, I remember Kelly wanted a final report, but that doesn't say that. It says,
So maybe we should include language that says a final report no later than 2 weeks. It says submitted in a final report to the Office of the City
Yeah.
Clerk, but do you think we need additional language there to explain that?
maybe it's assumed, maybe it's good enough. I don't know.
Okay,
Yeah, I think it's good enough.
okay. I think this next section is more challenging. F, around violations. And because it says that complaints alleging violation of the mandatory disclosure ordinance shall be administered in accordance with the process and penalties available under the Municipal Code of Ethics, reference Chapter 1, Article 8. So one of the reasons that I think this is challenging is that the Code of Ethics really pertains to individuals who've been elected to office, who are serving the city. And political action committees don't do that. And individuals who are not elected to office also don't do that. So if there is any violation alleged against a political action committee or against an individual who did not get elected to office. We probably need an additional reference here to how they will be, how we will deal with them under the
I guess,
Code of Ethics.
yeah, I guess if they're not elected, do we care?
Well,
You know, I guess, I mean,
I think that there is some value in caring about whether or not, even if they're not elected, because you could have individuals running just to create trouble if we're not holding everyone to the same standard who's running. The same thing with a political action committee. You don't want a political action committee raising huge amounts of money and spending it on the election and not disclosing it either.
You know, and you could also have candidates who run and lose, but they've been put up to run by special interests of some kind.
Right.
And I think it's good to have transparency around that.
Right. And it also, it encourages individuals who didn't win the election just to not file their final report if they're not held to the same standard. Currently, it says that everyone will be referred, but I think that we need to make sure that it's clear that those who are not in elected office, so therefore not technically working for the city, are held to the same standards and potential sanction under our ethics code.
I guess that's hard because they're not part of the city. So
Right.
if they're not elected, I mean, they don't fall under the rules of the city.
Right.
I mean, because it's elected and officers, you know.
Right.
I mean, I understand what you're saying in terms of it should be that way, but there's no real recourse for someone who does not fall under the auspices of being an officer or employee or, you know, all those definitions.
It's a challenge, right? But I think that there is some recourse in the sense that if it was recommended that they were sanctioned in some way by the ethics board, that sanction could take one of many forms. You know, that could be a referral even to the local court for a fine as well. So, and that is in that is in the realm of possibility, is what, if there
Yeah, I
is
think-
determined.
If I could,
Yes.
Councilor Cook, I think there's 2 points. One, I think even if not elected or even if a PAC, you'd still need a process to get some finding of fact. I mean, wouldn't that be true, Bob?
I think that is true. I think the process that is established under the Code of Ethics is proven to be a good process. It's been refined recently so that there'll now be an investigator. I also believe that the net result or the end result or the final result, the most by way of discipline or punishment that could come from violating this provision for a person who did not get elected is what Councilor Cook said, some kind of a written censure. But that's not a small thing. That's kind of a big
Yeah.
thing. A person who's interested in being a candidate for public office to have on their record a censure for an ethical violation following an investigatory process by a reputable group, I would think would be virtually fatal to any future political aspirations. It would bring an end to their career. So,
And second, I think the ethics board, as it's comprised, people who've been elected to school board, police commission, fire commission, and city council, those are all folks who have experience and an interest in keeping municipal elections clean and on the up and up. So I think for those two reasons, I think it does work. In theory, it's when you get into practice that we find the twists and turns.
One of the things that I discussed with the legal counsel as a possible reference here is including a reference to a potential referral. One of the things that is always, I think, critical about elections in making sure that they're clean and fair is that we have oversight not just locally, but there is oversight on the state level. So, and one of the remedies that's not listed in our Code of Ethics, because our Code of Ethics really does not envision just election violations, it's more like violations while you're in office, is a potential referral to the State Attorney General's office. And so you could add a reference here as an additional, including a potential referral to the State Attorney General's office for election violations.
the Attorney General's office has an Office of Public Integrity, which strikes me as an agency that might be interested in violations of an ethical code by a municipal official.
I think that might add that additional level of penalty that impacts everyone who's running for office or everyone who's involved in spending money for those to support those running for office. Whereas it doesn't always apply just to elected officials. So I don't know if do we want to ask the legal counsel to start looking at some language here that would make sure that that is clear, that is a potential remedy.
There could never be any harm in referring what is believed to be an ethical violation to the state or to the Attorney General's office. They might choose not to act on it,
Right.
but no harm is done by referring it to them, and some good might be done by referring it to them.
So I will say you've convinced me that this is proper for someone who is not elected. Okay.
Would we put the option of referral to the AG in section F, or would we put it in our language about the ethics committee, or both? Maybe that's something Bob could advise us on.
A lot of tremendous amount of deliberation. Both sounds like the answer to me.
Yeah.
And make it a new potential action that could be taken under the ethics code generally, and specifically reference it here.
So in the ethics code, you could say for election-related violations, referenced in section, 1902. Yeah. So we could add that language there as well.
Sure. Let me suggest that I'll propose something for this committee.
All right, thank you. Is there anything else under violations that we should be concerned about that we need to address? Then section G, the city clerk shall prepare forms which shall be utilized by all persons in political action committees, subject to these disclosures, which the city clerk has done and continues to do.
She does a good job at it.
Yes, it seems to me like a system that is working. Then the last is public records. All election financial disclosures shall be public records. I know one of the requests this committee received was to make sure things are published online. Just for, to make sure that they're more accessible to the general public rather than having to come in and request those records of those disclosures. What does the committee feel about asking that election disclosures are published online?
You know, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I wouldn't have thought it was necessary because it's such a good news story. But we can't guarantee that there'll be a reporter around to do that anymore. So maybe the way to, maybe without media coverage, you do have to publish it online.
Are we in agreement that that seems like a reasonable request? That seems to me like a reasonable thing to do. It doesn't necessarily have to be burdensome, I don't think, for the city clerk's office, if it's just scanning all the disclosures together and having a link, placed on the website where you can pull them up, like you can our ordinances. Are there any concerns on as far as from the staff side on how that would it be burdensome or?
I have no concerns. Obviously, any public record could be put online today without any change in the ordinance. But if the council wanted to change the ordinance just to guarantee that they're going to be published online, there's no problem with that either, I wouldn't think.
Okay.
I guess my feeling on that is that, from what Bob said, is that could be put online. And if, if anyone thought that it should be, it could be. I mean, and that wouldn't take. I sometimes worry about the clutter of our website. I don't know.
It's just
Maybe it should by default be there, but maybe that's not in an ordinance, but in a rule.
we could just say and publish publicly. Or some language like that. So,
I mean, it's public
noticed
record.
publicly.
It's public record,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. The challenge is, I think right now, it's in the way the records are obtained right now. Right now, in order to get the records, you have to put in a records request. You come in and request them versus having easy access to them like you would a notice. Because currently we publish all of our notices for meetings and agendas. We do all of that online now so that it's easily accessible, but it's also available on the boards out here for anybody who wants to come in and see it at City Hall versus looking online. I think it would be helpful to have the records accessible, and it may be just a link on the site that you can go to. So it may just be financial disclosures, see them here, with a link, so that it's not actually on the site, like obvious. You just push the link though, and there they are.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody can access them online and can be directed to that page without having to physically come into City Hall to request them. I think that's the concern, is more accessibility is better.
I have no problem with it. I just think that it's,
As long as we don't create clutter is the concern.
yeah, and I don't know.
The only argument against it that I can think of would be, would this discourage good candidates from running? But, you know, they're filling out a public disclosure form to begin with. So the assumption is that it's open to anyone who wants to read it. All we're doing is saying we're making it easier for anyone to read it.
And in the past, the
I'd be
paper.
more concerned about would it discourage people from donating to candidates?
Right, right. But in the past, we've had those forms, those have been regularly reported in the newspaper. So I think it should be really clear to candidates that you are gonna, your form is public and it is available for the newspaper to report. It would almost be better to have your form published, so you know that the news about it is accurate in some ways.
Yeah, the Herald, you know, so.
Yeah, you just, I mean, I think that there's value in having that your own form disclosed publicly, so.
Yeah. And I think it sends
Uh-oh, I think we've lost you, Counselor Tabor. I think you're frozen.
It looks like he's contemplating something.
I think he is contemplating something. Uh-oh. The challenges of internet from a
Well,
distance.
you only need a quorum to start the meeting. You could continue without it.
Okay, so,
So, I mean, I guess my question is, do we need to detail this type of level in this? Or is it just, sure, I mean, we can put it in.
So are the instructions from the committee to propose language to require these to be on the city website?
yeah, publicly
All
disclosed.
documents related, yep.
All election
Yeah,
finance
Sure,
shall be public records and publicly disclosed.
yeah.
And
Yep.
A
Okay.
vote of 2 and one unavailable.
yes, so, and that seems like a reasonable thing. And we'll look at the language too. So this isn't the first time. The language will come back to the committee
Yeah.
next time. So it's not, this isn't the only thing that we're looking at. Then I included Council Rule 21 here to make sure that we're aware of what it says. Hopefully Councilor Tabor can rejoin us here in a minute.
I have that up here.
And I think that there's value here. This committee's already looked at Council Rule 21 last year when we looked at all the council rules. And at the time, we were also looking at conflict of interest. But the value added here when we're talking about elections is also, there is a requirement here that you should not vote or serve on any committee or address any question in which you have a direct personal and pecuniary interest. And I think the operative term there is and. It's not an or. It's an and. So these three requirements must be met: direct, personal, pecuniary interest. But there's value in noting that here. And we added this language on there are additional provisions
And we
in the city
define
charter and ethics ordinance.
pecuniary elsewhere, too.
We do. So
Nice.
that's in ethics
Yeah.
already. So that, those definitions are available as well. And this is, again, a council rule, not,
Right.
it's not an ordinance, so. Oh, Counselor Tabor is calling me. Let's see if we can, he's probably having some troubles. Hello? Yes, we'll try that. Here, let me see if I can find the speaker, the phone number for the speaker phone.
I think we should
that
call
one
him.
back. All right, let me get that for you.
We should call him. I think that's where
We
we do
can
it.
call you directly for the speaker phone, so we will do that, okay? I have it now, yes. All right, we will call in. All right, bye.
I have to figure out how to use this thing.
Sorry for the technical difficulties. Counselor Tabor bounced off Zoom because he is remote in a location without the best internet service. So now we are
number you
going
have entered has not been recognized.
That's because it's not.
so we are going to call him in so he can conference in via phone.
Let me see, wait a minute, I gotta get my, where's my,
So give us just a moment.
too fast.
I can just read it. I
What?
don't think you had.
This number. I don't know. Did you get it there?
I have Counselor Tabor's phone number
I want to
here.
read it.
Bring it over. So you get it.
Thank you.
Wait, you have to do this.
I think I can do that
Oh.
after if I, and then I don't have to rush to make sure I get the right number.
Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Yes, thank you, Counselor Tabor, for calling us. I'm going to make sure we put a mic next to you and that
Oh, yes.
Counselor Lombardi has another mic. You got it? Okay. So we have moved on just to Council Rule 21, Counselor Tabor.
Yep.
And we were just looking at it and noting that it's something that we've already addressed last year, but that how it kind of dovetails nicely with the work we've done on the ethics ordinance, given that the definitions for pecuniary interest is already there in the updates that we made, and that it refers to a direct personal and pecuniary interest. So it's good to note that it's all of those things, because when we talk about conflict of interest, we're usually talking about a pecuniary interest. So
Right. And it's consistent with the charter section too.
yes. So I think that's important. I know there had been a question about Council Rule 21, and I wanted to make sure that we looked at it again and noted whether or not it was consistent today. With that, if there are no questions on Council Rule 21,
No?
then we'll go back to C under Old Business, which is the City Council Preliminary Draft Ethics Policy. I didn't receive input on this week, and I want to make sure that I get input from anyone who wants to add input before we have a more robust discussion on this issue. That's really my request today.
Yeah.
Is
We have that from,
it is not in your,
June.
yes,
that's the last I think we had of that.
Yes, we don't, it's not in your packet. This is just something we're considering at the moment. And we had discussed 4 potential areas to look at, not exerting undue influence on quasi-judicial board members in their official capacity as a council member, how we address representation at committee meetings, especially when you're attending committees for which you're not assigned, how we address conflicts around voting on ethics ordinances issues. I think that's really critical. And, well, actually, I only have those 3 issues so far. So if there's anything else that anyone is concerned about that does not rise to the level of inclusion in ordinance, but we want to include in a potential city council policy. And note that this is a potential city council policy around ethics that we have not, we've not determined we are going to adopt a city council policy. This is something that we're looking at as a possibility to move forward. I would ask that those committee members share those now or send them to the legal department for inclusion in a draft. Is there anything that off the top of your heads that we want to make sure we include next time, or are we happy sending those to the legal department?
I think that we've gone over this a lot, and I know Bob reviewed it and made some comments on it. Talked about the changing the amount from 100 to 350 for gifts other than city council or election. I think it's getting pretty close myself.
Okay. So if it's reasonable to the committee, then I would like to ask our legal counsel to come back with some draft language on a city council policy, which I'm happy to assist with for our next meeting. And then we will actually be able to look at it in language form. That's reasonable? Okay. And if there's nothing else there, then we'll move on to new business. We've already discussed the sidewalk policy. So the second item under new business is a mid-year report to the council. I'm happy to provide an update to the council at either our August meeting. Is there anything in particular we want to include in that update?
Well, I think it's valuable to point out that we steadily worked through the blue ribbon committees and tried to build, a more substantial structure around them. And we've done a lot of work on ethics and conflicts of interest. And I think those have been 2 big programs of work. We also looked at other forms of counselors by district and things, although I think that might have been last calendar year.
Yes, it was earlier.
Yeah.
But we are currently working on now election disclosures that we can talk about. So And then general disclosures, that's still coming. And and then now we've started work on the sidewalk policy.
Right.
So,
I'd have to go through the past agendas just to remind myself of what we've looked at.
we've looked at a lot
Yeah.
for the last year. I was planning just to give a quick oral report to the council. Is everyone comfortable with that?
Quicker the better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rather than doing I think our first update was kind of a PowerPoint of what we're doing. So, so I will, if it's okay with everyone here, I'll put it on August 7th. I'll put a little update to the council on what we've worked on, and kind of go through the list for the last 6 to 8 months.
Okay.
So everyone is familiar. It might be valuable to do this, noting that there are going to be several things coming forward from governance at this next meeting. And I was going to ask Councilor Lombardi if he would be willing to bring forward the Economic Development Commission from governance, so that because I know it was initially introduced by Councilor Lombardi to the council, I think it would be helpful for him to bring it back from governance.
Okay. So this coming meeting.
This coming meeting. And then I will bring back the changes to the conflict of interest section, which we've already approved at our last meeting, and then also the Arts and Cultural Commission ordinance. I'll bring forward those with a report from governance for request for first reading at the second meeting in August for council. So I guess it gives us an update of where we are now, and I'll be happily let the council know everything we have discussed. If there's anything in particular you want me to add to that, please reach out to the legal department and let them know,
Okay.
and I can do that. Yeah. So with that, if there's nothing else, is there any public comment? Please come forward.
Good morning, Peter Huda, 280 South Street. The first thing I'd like to talk to you about is your discussion on elections. So there was a statement made in the last meeting that, Councilor Cook, you were going to go over all of this stuff that related to elections with the city manager. The person who has charge of this is the city clerk. And previously, the city clerk reports directly to the Secretary of State. So I kind of knew that statement was false, so I started looking. So there is a chapter on elections, Title 53, Elections, Chapter 664, Political Expenditures and Contributions. And for those that don't know what I'm talking about, on the first one, it says General Provisions, 664.1, Applicability to the Charter. What it says in here is the provisions of the chapter shall apply to all state, primary, general, and special elections, but shall only apply to presidential preference primaries. The provisions relating to political advertising, push polling, and enforcement, RSA 664-14 through RSA 664-22, shall apply to presidential primaries, city, town, school districts, and village districts, which is us. So the first thing after looking this up, there is a section in here that changes every year according to what our legislature does. So in 2021, there was a significant change that actually affects us and what we have on our website. And the change is to 652.14A, relative to chief election officers, is repealed. Basically, Kelly is our chief election officer. As noted by her, I don't know what you want to call it, it's a documentary of what she does as the city clerk. In the second paragraph, it says, Ms. Barnaby, as city clerk, serves as the Portsmouth's chief election officer for federal, state, and local elections. So, in following state law and RSAs, that needs to be probably corrected. If you go through and look at the changes that were made, the changes that the legislature only actually made was the title. Kelly does the same jobs as she previously did. The other thing here, and I will go through what you discussed today and how the state actually addresses all of that. And I think it's very important that before Bob does any more research, you should go and see what the state says on contributions, on violations, on expenditures, and everything else. It's all in this chapter 664. And there is 23, I guess, sections that you need to look at. Not all of them apply, of course, because it has to be inclusive of the presidential and the primaries and all that other stuff. But I think it will help you. The other thing is what I read to you from the chief election officer. I think, in my opinion, Kelly is the best person to address any of this. She has to follow all the rules that come down from the state. There is a whole booklet and a whole training manual that comes out every year that she has to follow. And this has, basically, when she reports to the Secretary of State, it has nothing to do at the municipal level with the city manager or anybody else. She reports directly in. So, thanks to our legislature, there is changes every year. There is 2021 changes. There are some significant changes that you're discussing that you just had on voter checklists and availability. These were changes that were made in the 2022 election law. So, and they are halfway through 2023, so we have no idea where they are on that, and it's not published, so we can't implement yet. But as far as that goes, some sections that I'd like to call your attention to as you look at this, because you're looking at, as you discussed, penalties. The state has penalties. The state has fully describes in detail what are prohibited political contributions, what are fines, what are things that you can publish, reporting by candidates. The state, and we all know that we cannot, as a municipality, preclude what goes on in the state. So anything the state has supersedes anything we do here. So this might help you in your discussion, but reporting by political candidates is $1,000 in the new what they have here. You have duties. You have political advertising, misrepresenting origin of campaign calls. They went down in detail after the last election and put all this in. So a lot of the stuff is covered that you're discussing here, and I think it'll help you. They go down through political advertising and enforcement. It starts with complaints, and there's a paragraph in here of penalties, 664-21, which is specific to the stuff that you're discussing today. Council Lombardi was concerned about how to enforce this. The state has taken care of that for you with penalties and telling you how you have to show that prove the penalty, prove the complaint is legitimate. So on all of that stuff, I would suggest that you cross-reference this with Section 664. And I do believe Kelly does a fantastic job, and I think she is your best source of knowledge first before going to the legal department. Sorry, Bob.
No,
I know you don't want another job.
I think
This
you
is
made an excellent suggestion, and and we will do that.
This is Kelly's whole bailiwick here, so she should be able to help you and maybe cut down some of the time that you're spending on this. And that's all I got. Hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Just for the committee's benefit, I will get RSA 654. I'll review it all in connection with what you have voted today. The general principles that former Councilor Huda listed are accurate. The city clerk, when she's performing election services, is responsible to the state. And if the city were to have some ordinance or policy or rule that was inconsistent with state law, the state law governs. Those things are accurate. So I will review RSA 654 to see how that plays out in connection with what you've proposed today.
Okay. Thank you so much. Announcements? Are there any other announcements? If not, the committee meets, we only have on the schedule one meeting in August due to other schedules and scheduling conflicts. So we are meeting in a short turnaround, everyone should note, in 1 week on August the 7th. That's a quick turnaround, but I think that we had some conflicting vacation schedules, like as you would expect for August. And so that has created a challenge for us. If for some reason the committee at our next meeting in a week determines that we need to meet again later, we can try to find a time, but I know that there were some real challenges there.
What about September? What is our schedule in September?
And in September, we are currently scheduled to meet, I believe, September the 11th, which is, I should note, we might have to move the time around that. I believe City Hall is open that day, but we will have a memorial service just before, on the 11th outside. And so we should be cognizant of that. That might push that meeting back a little bit. And currently that is the only scheduled meeting I have for September. So we might need to get through this work, add a few meetings. I think that that's important to note. In September, we have another date that's a possibility, the 25th, I believe. But I don't have in front of me a calendar of High Holy Days, so we need to be cognizant of that as well. But we can look through that schedule. When we get to October, we have also currently one meeting scheduled in October on the 23rd. Or actually, we have two. We have one the 10th and then the 23rd, and the 10th is a Tuesday. That's because of the Indigenous Peoples' Day holiday on the 9th. So I can send around an updated schedule so that everyone is aware again of the schedule for the year. And
Yeah, do that.
okay, I can do that. If there are no other announcements or concerns, I'd take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, on a roll call vote, Councilor Lombardi,
Yes.
Councilor Tabor,
Yes.
and I'm Councilor Cook, yes. We are adjourned. Thank you.